It's Friday, it's 12:15 and we're live in Westminster. Joining me today, The Telegraph's Camilla Tominey, the Liberal Democrat MP Layla Moran, The Guardian's Jessica Elgut and Tom Harwood from the Guido Fawkes website. So when are we leaving the EU?
The European Council agrees to an extension until the 20th of April. 12th of April.
Even Donald Tusk is confused about when we might be leaving. After a tense EU summit, Theresa May is back from Brussels and has just 2 weeks to reach an agreement with Parliament. Or could MPs take control?
I hope we can all agree we are now at the moment of decision.
And podcaster and comedian Deborah Frances-White explains why she's a guilty feminist.
I would normally make sure my hair was really nice and I'd had a blow dry if I was going to be on television, but I forgot they were coming.
So, the question for today, Camilla, will Theresa May still be Prime Minister this time next week?
Who knows? Let's be honest. I think she probably will be, because Brexit Day is obviously meant to be on Friday and we've got this massive week. The media have been going, this weeks couldn't get bigger than this. And we've seen a few weeks, let's face it, that have been fairly seismic on the old headline scale.
Hyperbole.
Hyperbole. We love a bit of that. I think she's under increasing pressure. Obviously, our newspaper, The Telegraph, today has got this report that Sir Graham Brady, chairman of the 1922 Backbench Committee, went and saw and said, look, MPs want you to go. I don't think she could have avoided seeing that in the press anyway. We've been briefed by countless MPs saying enough's enough, her days are numbered.
Yeah.
Well, will she be Prime Minister next week?
I think she will. I think she will, because I see her taking this to its conclusion. Where on earth that is, we still don't know. But I know, like, certainly in the tea room, the frustration from her own MPs about how she's handled this is palpable. And there is an argument for, you know, if anyone else was in charge, would we be in this position? Who knows?
Jess?
I think that certainly the message that felt like was coming out of Brussels last night was that they have come to the end of the road with this Prime Minister and what they can negotiate with her. So effectively, she stood up to speak to them for 90 minutes. They said they could barely get any answers out of her about what she would do if she lost the next set of meaningful votes. And they essentially had to set her a deadline for her. They had to force Parliament to making a decision on their own timetable. And I think, you know, it felt pretty clear to me that the message was coming out of, if you can't pass this deal, if you're not going to go for no deal, then send someone else to negotiate.
Tom?
It seems that over this week, it's more than just the usual suspects coming out now and saying she has to move on. We've seen countless MPs from the Tory side, and not just the really hardcore ERG Eurosceptics who are saying this. I think there was a collective sense of sadness, really, when Theresa May stood inside Downing Street on Wednesday evening and didn't announce anything different, didn't announce any sort of change. And that's what everyone on all sides of this debate are pining for right now.
Right, well, let's talk to the government, because we can welcome Rory Stewart, who is the Prisons Minister. Welcome back to the show. Rory, do you think she'll still be Prime Minister next week?
Yes.
What makes you so sure?
Because I think she's a very determined, resilient lady.
Did it misfire catastrophically, her speech on Wednesday night?
I think MPs are maybe tougher than they're making out. We spend our entire days being attacked by constituents in the media, so I think there's a little bit of melodrama going on from MPs suddenly pretending they're hypersensitive.
What, you think they overreacted? You don't think that was the most disastrous intervention by a Prime Minister in recent times?
I don't think it was the most disastrous intervention by a Prime Minister in recent times. But just to go on, I mean, we are criticised all the time. I think the idea that MPs are going to change their votes on the basis of what the Prime Minister said is a bit disingenuous. If they're voting against the deal, it's probably because they decided 2 months ago. So why blame them? Why
stand up when she's been in charge of this process for 2.5 years and blame MPs and pit Parliament against the people?
So I think she's a little bit frustrated, and I think she has and she has a reason to be a little bit frustrated, which is that in the end, the withdrawal agreement is necessary, regardless whether you want to go for Norway or a customs union. It's not her that keeps saying this. People keep saying she's rigid. The European Union keeps saying this.
Rory, you know, I'm sorry, but yes, it's true. We all get criticism. You don't do this job unless you can have a thick skin. But for your Prime Minister to essentially throw MPs and Parliament under the bus because of her own lack of leadership. I was outraged by her speech. I was outraged. And this is not me, I'm really, really upset because we are all here trying to do our best and suggesting that we're playing sort of party political games or whatever. No, I'm standing up for my constituents. I was elected on a manifesto to do exactly what I'm doing. That is surely holding us all in contempt.
Full of respect for you, and I'm sure that's true. All I'm saying is that I don't think MPs would have changed their vote on the basis of that speech.
So what was the point of doing it then?
Exactly.
I mean, what was the point of blaming them? Wasn't the whole idea to try and bring round MPs, trying to persuade them? And actually, she sabotaged that operation, and the whips are feeling it.
Mm-hmm. So I don't think she's sabotaged anything. To be honest, Layla was never going to vote for the withdrawal agreement, regardless of what happened. And I think people who are suggesting that somehow this speech has tipped things one way or another are exaggerating.
Was it a mistake, though? That's the point. Was the speech a mistake?
Not a great mistake,
She was rowing back on it a bit yesterday, though, Rory. She accepted. We've had in the press now, I think, Ben Bradley, David Davis, who voted last time as well, saying, I don't know now. This anger from Liberal Democrats, she was meant to come across and try and appeal to Labour MPs, presumably like Caroline Flint, and not just the arch Eurosceptics, but others in the more moderate wing of the party to come across. They're furious.
I agree, there's a lot of fury. But in the end, this isn't about charming MPs on Downing Street. This is about the fundamentals of the deal. And the MPs will make up their minds, hopefully, on the basis of the national interest. And we can't just... I mean, in the end, David Davis, even if you were super nice to him, or super nasty to him, is going to vote on the basis of what he thinks is the right thing to do. So, yes, OK, there's a lot of controversy. There's a lot of controversy about that. But to try to move forward, the fundamental question is, what happens on Tuesday and Wednesday?
We'll come to that. Yeah. But, Rory, actually, members of the Cabinet disagree with you. They think it was a mistake. Let's listen to Greg Clark.
It's understandable, given the sense of frustration she had that people weren't coming together. But it clearly wasn't a great success. I don't think it was helpful in resolving the matter. But listen, none of us is infallible, and even prime ministers sometimes don't get the tone quite right. I think this is a time for us all to come together, to find common ground, and to do what it takes to resolve this matter.
Greg Clark talking to Nick Robinson in the Political Thinking podcast. The tone was wrong.
OK, you're asking me again and again to defend my boss, and I have an enormous amount of admiration for her.
But did she get it wrong on this case?
I agree she was frustrated. I agree that people have been offended. That's obvious, and a lot of things that Greg agreed with. But I honestly think at this moment, focusing on that speech will not have made the difference one way or another. So if you want me to come on public television and criticise my boss, we can keep going. But I think it's important to move on to the substance of next week.
Right, but I suppose people want to ask, who's behind the strategy on this? I mean, who makes the decisions? Who's responsible for the Prime Minister standing up on live television? She may be frustrated, I'm sure she is, but frustration usually comes out spontaneously. It's not written into a speech and delivered to millions of people.
OK, so behind that speech is one thing that we haven't talked about enough, which is the European Union's position. A lot of this is being expressed as the Prime Minister having red lines or the Prime Minister being uncompromising. And there's a real reluctance to acknowledge from Labour MPs who want to vote for a Brexit deal that the withdrawal agreement is necessary, and the European Union has made that clear again and again. Layla's in a different camp. She wants a second referendum. But if you want a Brexit deal, you have to have this withdrawal agreement.
All right.
And unless people realise that by Tuesday, we're in a very serious problem.
So, Rory sounding all low-key and emollient here today and not prepared to say that that speech was a mistake. In your mind and the people you've spoken to, Jess, was it?
I think that the key reason for it was a mistake was not necessarily because of MPs like Layla, but because of MPs like Lisa Nandy, who were the people who came out and who were people on the verge of voting for the Prime Minister's deal, saying that she feels like she cannot support this deal because the Prime Minister is taking kind of anti-democratic tone. And I think for Labour MPs, the key worry for them, those who have leave voting constituents, the ones who want to deliver Brexit, and who really, if we're honest with ourselves, have no issue at all with the withdrawal agreement. The thing they have an issue with is, first, who's going to be leading the Conservative Party in the next few months' time, and can they trust this Prime Minister's promises about what will happen in the next stage of the negotiations? Those are the two things they really don't feel they have clear answers on.
But they have to vote for the withdrawal agreement. That's the problem.
Why do they have
they
to?
don't.
Why do they have to vote for it?
Because without the withdrawal agreement voted for on Tuesday, we enter very, very risky waters. It doesn't matter which side you come from. If you're somebody who wants a second referendum, you could end up in a no deal. If you're somebody who wants a no deal, you could end up remaining in the EU. If, like Lisa, or many Labour MPs, you want to end up in Norway or a customs union, you have to vote for the withdrawal agreement.
This is why we need indicative votes.
And I think the idea that looking in 20 years' time backwards, people will conclude that a single speech in Downing Street was the problem is not true. What the problem is a structural problem of the way that Parliament is set up.
Well, let's look back just a couple of days instead, and to last night, and listen to Theresa May first delivering that speech that people have been criticising, and then a slightly more emollient tone the following evening.
I am absolutely sure you, the public, have had enough. You're tired of the infighting. You're tired of the political games and the arcane procedural rows. Tired of MPs talking about nothing else but Brexit. I know MPs on all sides of the debate have passionate views, and I respect those different positions. Last night I expressed my frustration, and I know that MPs are frustrated too. They have difficult jobs to do.
Tom, is she the right person to find the common ground?
Clearly not. She hasn't been able to find it for the last 3 years. And what I find totally extraordinary about this is that the spinners in Number 10 were walking about the bars of Westminster after the speech, decrying it as a great success, saying that this was an amazing stroke of strategic communication genius. and we only needed to look at the reaction, not just on Twitter, but in the media the morning after, to see that they had totally struck the wrong tone. They are so isolated within their bunker mentality. This feels really like the end of the sort of Gordon Brown days of government. We're seeing the Prime Minister so isolated, not just from Parliament in general, but her own party now. And really something has to change.
You mentioned the Graham Brady, important man, of course, in Tory party backbench circles, going to see Theresa May. I mean, explain a little bit more how toxic it is for Theresa May.
Rory can give more detail, I suppose, on the inside, but I hear that the tea room now is quite an uncomfortable place because people are divided on Brexiteer and Remain lines. There's general dissatisfaction with her. She's indecisive, she's inscrutable, she's too reliant on her brief, she can't do spontaneity. There's been an issue with her public speaking throughout. There's a sense coming back from the EU that she hasn't told them after all this time what we really want. Does she even know what we want? Does she believe in what we want? You know, there is a conclusion to what will happen next week, deal or no deal, is that Brexit will happen. Brexit is in legislation to happen. Layla here talks about indicative votes. Weren't all of the votes on the amendments that we've had over the last fortnight indicative? We got an indication that people weren't in favour of no deal, but we also got an indication that people were in favour of, to quote him, the Brady Amendment, saying that the withdrawal agreement needed to be changed in order to get it over the line. She hasn't produced those legally binding changes according to a series of lawyers. So to go back to MPs and say it's their fault, it's no wonder they're so frustrated.
So I think this is a little bit unfair. It seems to be open house on attacking the Prime Minister, and if she gets frustrated and criticises MPs, suddenly everybody gets very offended, and she's not allowed to be offended. The MPs get to be offended.
Rory,
the key question, though, is this. People are not being realistic about the future options. These indicative votes are guesses. People are talking about a Norway double plus, which is not on offer from the EU. They're talking about a customs union plus, which is not on offer from the EU. So the catastrophe will not vote for her agreement on Tuesday, go into indicative votes on Wednesday, produce a vague idea, which the EU will say no to.
We're going to talk about it, but let me set out the options for our viewers, because next week, if Theresa May's deal is finally approved by MPs at a third attempt, then there'll be an extension to Article 50 until the 22nd of May. If MPs vote against her deal for a third time, then the government and Parliament have 2 weeks to work out a plan. Now, that may include MPs taking control with a series of what we've been talking about, indicative votes, to work out where the majority lies, if at all, for a different type of Brexit. The EU said yesterday the UK would have until Friday the 12th of April to make their mind up. By that point, if a Brexit deal still hasn't passed, Donald Tusk says the UK could either leave on no deal, accept a long extension and take part in European elections, or revoke Article 50 and effectively cancel Brexit. What would you prefer?
At this point, I'd like a longer extension, actually. And whilst, you know, I'm passionately pro-European and would rather we were staying, I also don't think that that is the right thing to do. We need to put it back to the people to make sure it's what they want.
What would be the options in the referendum?
I'd rather have a long extension. In the interim, have these indicative votes, work out where there are options, maybe even a ballot that's got preferential voting on it, something like that, so that we can bring consensus to the House. And just coming back to the point about that speech, what we need now is to take the heat out of all of this. I don't think good decisions are made when people are, this frantic, in such a frenzy. What we need to do is have a long extension and then take a breath and work it out.
This is extraordinary. The idea that having a long extension would do anything other than turn up the temperature in this fraught political debate is for the birds. And the idea that pursuing a second referendum would take the heat out of this. We saw what happened during the last referendum.
The way that
we go into, under a long extension, we go into European elections where Nigel Farage is now leading the new Brexit party. Other parties may not stand. I know many Conservative MPs wouldn't even be voting for the Conservative Party in that situation.
Well,
what we would see is a totally fraught political culture. You think things are hot now. I can't imagine what they'd look like under that situation.
What we want to do is to make it stop, Tom. And the way to make it stop...
You make it stop? More referendums, more elections?
The way to make it stop is you put this deal back to the people with the option to remain, two clear options, and as with the Kyle, I want to make Brexit stop. That's very clear.
So you're extending to make it stop eventually. You just want to make it a little bit of a longer.
No.
You want people to be worn down and for everyone to say, this is too difficult. We can't do this. That's why you're really. Just be honest, Layla. You ultimately do want to stop Brexit. You were saying earlier you like this petition to revoke Article 50,
which has hit 3 million.
You don't want Brexit.
It is our party's policy to make Brexit
that's
stop.
Why you're in the margins.
Right.
That's why
and
you're
that's
in the margins,
why we want. But we accept that we shouldn't be just revoking Article 50 without putting it back to the people.
Have you signed that petition?
Yes, I have.
Right, hang on. On a lengthy extension, Theresa May has said she will not accept or countenance a lengthy extension. So if her deal is voted down and there needs to be a lengthy extension to explore other options, will she be the Prime Minister that stays and actually allows that to happen?
I imagine so. I think she's a very tough, resilient person, and she's likely to stay because she believes it's her duty to try to deliver things. But the problem is that the fundamental problem that we don't talk about enough, I think, in Britain is Europe. So people are criticising her for not getting what Parliament wanted in the Brady Agreement. It wasn't her, it was Europe doesn't want to give it. People are now going to vote on indicative votes for things that Europe are not going to give. So the problem...
How do you know they're not going to give a customs union? I've heard different.
No.
I've heard different on that. So why do you say that?
That's not what I said.
You did earlier.
No. What I said is that they wouldn't give a Norway double plus and they wouldn't give a customs union with these added advantages. What they're likely to give is a customs union identical to what already exists in the political declaration and the backstop. It will be that kind of customs union.
Well, how will the indicative votes work, Rory? Because will it be the government laying out specific options that range from a second referendum to a permanent membership of a customs union? Is that how it's going to happen in your mind? Or is it going to be MPs who take control?
So one of the problems is that. And the second problem is, depending on how you arrange the indicative votes, the voting system, you will favour one option over another. So if you did an exclusionary thing, so knock out second referendum, knock out no deal and start narrowing down, you're going to end up with one kind of option. If you went for another one, where everybody's allowed to vote multiple times, you get another one. But the fundamental problem is that we will come out of it, probably, with MPs saying, we'd like a softer Brexit, we'd like a Norway double plus where we don't have any immigration, or we'd like a customs union where we have full control of our trade deals. We'll go back to Brussels, and Brussels will say, sorry, that's not an offer. And then that soft vote in Parliament will collapse again, and we'll be no closer to a deal.
Is that how you read it?
I can't really understand why the government doesn't seize the opportunity to have indicative votes, to be honest, because I think one of the reasons that certain cabinet ministers are really fond of the idea of indicative votes is they believe that that won't show any consensus either, and therefore you end up in a situation where you actually have no majority in Parliament for anything. And does that cause people to then look again at the Prime Minister's deal? I think it possibly would.
What do Brexiteers do? What do the Brexiteers in Cabinet do? Because this will come down to those two groups of Cabinet ministers who, on the one hand, the Remainers, Brexiteers, trying to push this their way.
Well, the Brexiteers in Cabinet have obviously reconciled themselves to the Prime Minister's deal as almost the only way to guarantee the cleanest break we can have. And what we've seen is about half the ERG are now actively considering voting for the deal as well, because what I worry about is that we have a two-thirds Remain Parliament. Last Thursday, there was a vote on no deal. 202 members of Parliament voted to keep no deal as the legal default, and 412 members of Parliament voted to remove it as the legal default. I'm not sure that this is a Parliament that would allow no deal to go through in any sense, and I say that with massive regret because I think that would be the best option for the country right now. But I just think that this is a balance of risk now.
Also,
and it seems that if the deal is voted down, it's more likely than not that will head towards something that looks a lot more like Norway than something that looks a lot more like no deal.
The Hobson's choice facing MPs is almost the Hobson's choice that's facing government. When you said, Jess, you know, why not just have this so that we'll end up segued towards a soft Brexit? Because that's electoral suicide for the Tories.
But has she got
and
to
it's
let go
not great
of
for
that?
Labour in the North
towards
either.
A soft Brexit. I think it would be towards her deal. I mean, I just think that the soft Brexit doesn't necessarily have a majority.
Tom, you point out, I agree, there's some softening and some wavering in the ERG because they feel they're being faced with this deal or no Brexit. Not just this deal or no deal, but this deal and no Brexit, obviously, and they don't like it. So it's a choice between a bad deal, which delivers a bad Brexit, but at least it's Brexit, and no Brexit at all. But at the same time, you've still got, I would imagine, about 20 hardcore ERGers that aren't going to vote for this withdrawal agreement, whatever happens.
Why should MPs trust the government to actually deliver on this pledge to allow them to have time? I mean, she has reneged on so many things. In the end, you can understand why MPs want to seize control of the agenda via amendments next week to ensure that they are given time to discuss these votes. Even you are dismissing the idea, saying, well, the EU wouldn't agree to any of them anyway.
Well, I agree there is an issue of trust, but I think, again, I keep returning to this, looking back at this whole story, and we're now so close to the edge.
But do you trust her to deliver on what David Lidington...
I trust.
David Lidington said. You don't trust her?
No, I don't trust her at all anymore.
I trust her, and I trust David Lidington, and I think this will happen. But the more fundamental problem is that people, I think, in 15 years' time looking at this will really think it's very strange. The withdrawal agreement, the EU keeps saying, is necessary for all these options. Just vote for the withdrawal agreement. It's really
Are you saying MPs just don't understand? Are you saying that MPs are being slightly dim in terms of realising that actually everything can be thrashed out in the political declaration afterwards? And if that is the case, do you think the Prime Minister and the government should support the amendment that actually says, give us the future shape of the relationship with the EU on top of the withdrawal agreement, and Labour MPs will back the plan?
Well, it would be interesting if Labour MPs were really behind that. I mean, I know Lisa Nandy's interested in that, and I've got a lot of time for her, and she's exactly the kind of person we should be talking to. Jeremy Corbyn, I'm afraid, and the Labour front bench is still very reluctant to budge a quarter of an inch. I mean, there's a lot of talk about the Prime Minister's red lines, but we haven't seen a single shift.
That's because he wants to create chaos, which will end up in a general election, which is what he wants.
And a revolution, apparently.
Yes, or something, in Cuba style.
Which is extraordinary, because the Prime Minister's deal, as it stands, is basically Jeremy Corbyn's deal. The reason why the ERG are so reluctant to back it, why I think it's such a terrible deal, is that it might lead us towards a permanent customs union. The backstop contains a permanent customs union. The red lines that the Labour Party have set out in terms of what they want their deal to look like are identical to the Prime Minister's deal, other than the political declaration, which is non-binding. So you can see they're clearly playing political games here.
But that's not where the majority is in Parliament, and I do disagree.
Where is the majority in Parliament?
I think there is a majority for a softer Brexit that includes, you know, something much closer, staying in the single market, staying in the customs union. There would definitely be a majority.
We had votes on amendments, and there wasn't a consensus for that. There was a consensus for an amendment which said, please, can we make the withdrawal agreement a bit better?
No, there was
We'll have the withdrawal agreement.
Sorry.
And also, to be fair, in a way, Tom's right. You know, if Brexiteers don't like the withdrawal agreement because it's too soft, then Remainers have to make a really, really, really good argument for why they're blocking it. And at the end of the day, we know why they're blocking it. It's not because they're unhappy with the withdrawal agreement. Cooper, Letwin, Bowles, you don't want Brexit. You want it to be reversed.
All right.
Just be honest about it.
Are they going to be free votes?
Are there going to be free votes? I don't know. That will be decided by the whips on Monday.
Right, so you are not sure at this point whether those indicative votes allowing MPs to decide what they prefer, you're not going to...
I don't control the whipping. I can't tell you that now.
I mean, the Brexit Minister, Kwasi Kwarteng, implies that there will be free votes. Is that the right way to go, Rory?
I don't want to get ahead of me. I'm a government minister. But I agree that if we're going to do indicative votes in Parliament, then it would probably have to be close to a free vote. Yes, no, sorry, I'm going to come out and be bold here.
Be bold. What's close to a free vote? So they should be free votes.
With the proviso that I'm not the whip, logically speaking, if Parliament is to express its view on Wednesday, it should be free to express its view.
Jess, what do you make?
It's kind of pointless to have indicative votes unless they're free votes, right? I mean, what's the point in having them otherwise? And I think what you need to do is try and find a parliamentary majority for something that's practical. And I think, Rory does keep emphasising the fact that the withdrawal agreement, is the thing that's set in stone and the other things could be negotiated later. And I think that that's something that's been accepted by Jeremy Corbyn and Keir Starmer. Like it's something that's been accepted by Nick Boles and the Norway and people who want the Norway option. The thing they're interested in changing is the political declaration. They've made it clear time and time and time again. And therefore, for them, what's the point in voting for the Prime Minister's deal this week? They may as well vote it down, and then use those 2 weeks to try and say, well, these are the changes that we're demanding in the political declaration.
The answer to that is that if they genuinely, Keir Starmer, Nick Boles, Jeremy Corbyn, are happy with the withdrawal agreement, let's get it through.
No, because
wait.
They're not happy with the political declaration.
That's fine, but it would make such an enormous difference. I mean, it's not a trivial thing. Incredible difference in our relationship to the European Parliament, Council, business, investment, confidence, if we just got the withdrawal agreement landed. Just got the withdrawal agreement landed. And they haven't proposed that yet. We haven't seen any proposal of that sort coming from them.
But it's the political declaration that is linked to it that needs changing. And I think there is room there.
All right, before we move on, we were talking about leadership earlier. We know Vince Cable is going to stand down and there will be a Lib Dem leadership contest. Will you throw your hat into the ring?
I haven't decided.
I hope you do, Layla.
Yes.
I've said to Layla she must.
Well, that'll do it, Camilla, I'm sure.
At the end of the day, I'm saying that because, funny enough, in life and in politics, we can get on with each other even if we disagree on the fundamentals. And Layla has been a very passionate advocate of Liberal Democrat policies. She's a young and up-and-coming MP. She's a woman. She's a legend, and I think she should.
I don't say, will you do it now, Layla, on the back of that?
It would be nice for a political party, for a UK political party that wasn't the Conservative Party, to have a female leader for once. It hasn't happened to any other party.
It's a massive life decision, and I'm not taking it.
Is that really a party?
But you're considering
not UK-wide.
it.
Not UK-wide.
OK. Rory, thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Now, a different question. Are you a guilty feminist? What exactly is a guilty feminist? Take a look at this.
Deborah Frances-White is the co-creator and star of the hugely successful podcast The Guilty Feminist, which has been downloaded more than 60 million times.
So give us a cheer if you listen to The Guilty Feminist.
Why is the feminist guilty?
Each episode of the podcast, we open with I'm a feminist but. And this is where we exfoliate anything in which maybe our values and our actions don't meet in the middle.
I'm a feminist, but while I know that rock stars have a trick of looking out into the audience and kind of winking and making 1,000 women feel winked at, I truly believe with all my heart, and you will never shake me of this belief, that Paul McCartney winked directly at me at a concert in Sydney some years ago.
Born in Australia, she moved to the UK in her late teens, becoming a successful writer and comedian with a particular brand of confessional and politically aware humour.
Where did the idea for the podcast come from? Well, it was 2015. Hillary Clinton was running for the White House and obviously was going to win, for sure. And I remember talking to my girlfriends in a different way. We had been talking about our careers, what was unfair for us as individuals. We were talking about our own love lives. And suddenly, these Sex and the City-style conversations started to morph into political conversations about how things were changing for women and how we could change them for women. And because we were comedians, obviously, we had to turn that into a podcast.
If you don't know what a podcast is, it's radio that nobody stops you making. It's why women do it so often, because the normal channels are closed down to us.
I think people do feel more comfortable saying they're a feminist now because we've really changed and defined what feminism means. A feminist is someone who strives to make the world a better place for everyone.
So I'm reading from my book, The Guilty Feminist. Sunday Times bestseller. Don't go on about it, though. There's no need.
There is a stereotype of the angry feminist, the angry black woman, the angry lesbian. But anger is just one common response to exclusion.
In your view, is Theresa May, is she a feminist?
I can't call Theresa May a feminist because her austerity policies have driven many women and also men who were on the breadline into poverty and into homelessness.
I would never take a selfie from that angle. I just want that. Is this going on BBC Politics? Are you actually... This is just a bit where they... You know when they do a bit about... You're on BBC Politics. Who the you.
The gender pay gap, Me Too, these are things that have all been happening over the last couple of years. Do you feel that there has been a really seismic shift?
The difference in gender politics between 2015 and 2019 is so stark. Everything's different. All the rules have been rewritten.
Also, I would normally make sure my hair was really nice and I'd had a blow dry if I was going to be on television, but I forgot they were coming, so my hair is really flat and dreadful. When you see it on television, like, take all of that into account.
At the moment, what we're seeing is a period in history where for the very first time, men, and often white men or white straight men, are being told this space is now being reshaped. And that's very confronting if you've always been part of the dominant group. So I understand what men are feeling right now when they're going, hey, why is everything changing? But they are experiencing what women have experienced for millennia.
And that was Elizabeth Glinker talking to Deborah Frances-White, who is here in the studio with us. Why guilty feminists? Why are you guilty about it?
Well, it's really an exfoliation of guilt. I think all the time women are told, you know, we're not good enough at work, we're not good enough at home. If you're in your career, you're being brilliant, you're failing as a mum or a daughter or a friend. And so this is the space where women can come together and say, I'm not sure I'm doing this right, but I'd like to build muscle, I'd like to get better at it. And I thought at first I might get kicked out of the feminist club for saying all of these things, like I'm a feminist, but the first thing I ever confessed was I'm a feminist, but one time I went on a women's rights march and I popped into a department store to use the loo, and I got distracted trying out face cream, and when I came out, the march was gone. And I thought, they're going to kick me out.
OK, you should feel guilty. You should feel guilty about missing the march. But is that because you're still, to some extent, conforming to the stereotypical view of feminism, that you have to feel guilty about putting face cream on and missing the march?
Well, I think the idea of the show is that we can laugh at those things and let them go. And we're kind of making fun of that idea in a way. But also, guilt and shame are real for women. I mean, we are raised with guilt and shame. And if you feel guilt, and then you don't let it out, you don't laugh at it, or go, actually, I'd like to make that better, it turns into shame, and that's luggage. You carry that with you. And I found that when I started admitting my things, other women were like, oh, my God, thank God you've said that. And now this is a space where we can come together, we can celebrate, it's an entertaining space, but where we can talk about real things we care about.
Strike a chord?
Just the guilt. I was just thinking, I've got a Catholic father and a Jewish stepmother, so
best of luck.
I literally guilt squared. I've never felt more guilty. I've also got 3 kids, and I'm a working mother, and I'm away this weekend, and the kids were guilt trips. But I was just thinking in general about feminism. I don't know, like, I'm a woman in journalism, I don't really think about it. No. I would always recommend, you know, we don't need to put in headlines, female barrister does X, just put barrister. I don't make a big deal, oh, I'm a woman, everybody. Just get on with your job, do the best that you can do, be the best woman you can be. I love women, I love working with women, I also love men, and I love working with them too. We sometimes, I think, are over-explaining ourselves and trying to justify where it's just not necessary. Men don't make these justifications, they just get on with it.
I do think we need to also, though, recognise when it's not working, and there are things in the workplace that aren't conducive to, you know, women making real choices, when they can go back to work or not. So, you know, we've got to, when it's happening, when the tax system is, you know, not helping women get on, there's all sorts of things that in society are sort of built in. I recently was reading a book about how even, you know, the way that medicines are tested is actually very male. And when we've got train carriages where you're trying to put your bag up, and they're all designed by and for men. So there's all sorts of different little almost micro things that add to this sense that, you know, women do need to be in charge of those positions, so they're making those decisions. There's no harm in talking about that. But in terms of the guilt, all of us feel it, I think. And especially if you've got kids. Most of my friends with kids would say, I just feel guilty all the time, and they really shouldn't.
No, I completely agree. I'm reading that book too, Invisible Women by Caroline Correa Perez. And there's an extraordinary amount of structural damage done where we take it on and make it personal. So one thing is that women are always told we're not confident enough. We're constantly being told that. You're not confident enough, you should be more confident. Why don't you go on a special remedial confidence day? There's nothing worse for your confidence than someone going, be more confident. We're constantly told that. And that's a structural thing. And of course, then it erodes our confidence.
What about men's reaction to this type of feminism or the development of feminism? Tom, can you relate?
Well, it depends what you mean by feminism, doesn't it? If you ask almost anyone in the country whether they believe in equality between men and women, you'd be loath to find almost anyone who would disagree with that notion. I mean, any opinion poll would show that almost everyone identifies with the notion that men and women should have equal rights under law and in society. But then only 9% of people in the country, of women in the country actually, according to a Fawcett Society poll 2 years ago, identify as feminist. So clearly there's a bit of a disassociation here going on in your head. And I think anyone under the definition of feminism as equal rights between men and women would put their hands up and say, absolutely, I'm a feminist. But then you do get these more insidious branches of feminism that almost say that that are very exclusionary, that say if you have the wrong politics, you can't be a feminist. People say that Theresa May can't be a feminist. People say that if you believe in, I don't know, tax cuts, you can't be a feminist.
Theresa May can't be a feminist. I think she isn't a feminist. Of course, she could be a feminist, but she would have to change the things she was doing. Because
so
feminism isn't just...
Is it a political thing in terms of more than just believing in equality?
It's about
or is it
doing things that would close the power imbalance. Yeah. So you can't just say, I'm a feminist, and then proceed to do things that widen...
What are those things that you're referring to, though? Because people have very different opinions as to what the outcomes of certain policies are.
But the reality is that austerity, brought in by Theresa May, has made the lives of the poorest women more difficult. And so the job of the wealthiest women...
If someone believes in balancing the country's books, they can't be a feminist. This is extraordinary.
Well, hang on. Let Tom finish his point.
This is absolutely extraordinary. If you believe that a country should live within its means, you can't believe in the concept of equal rights between men and women. I think that is why only 9% of people in the country identify as feminist. And I think there is a massive, massive gap between the media class, where almost everyone would be very happy to say, I'm a feminist.
But Deborah's saying that it hit women disproportionately. That was the point.
Right, that was mainly because certain benefits went to being means-tested, like child benefit, so which went to women, so rich women weren't getting money anymore, so it obviously, on an aggregate graph, looked like women were hit more.
Is that
but in the real world, not so much.
Right. What do you say?
I don't agree with anything that you've just said. I think it is the job of the more influential and more powerful women to be looking out and saying who isn't in this room, who isn't on this panel, who isn't being catered to. And if life is getting more difficult for women who are marginalised, then it is the job of influential women to make sure that they are brought up the ladder and not pushed further down the ladder.
To be fair, in Theresa May's... Hang on a second. Theresa May, to be fair, she's had a bit of a difficult hour. So let's say something in her favour. She introduced Women to Win, which is an initiative to get more women into politics, not just Conservatives, but across the board. She has championed women in politics. She's made that one of her key aims, not just now, as she's been Prime Minister, but when she first started out. So let's... Of course, we can all be nuanced in... I try and be a feminist in that I help, girls from a girls' school come in and have some work experience in the political field. But sometimes I'm not a feminist because I enjoy a bit of probably inappropriate banter with male colleagues. We're not all just entirely one thing.
No, well, that's very much the idea of my podcast, is The Guilty Feminist. But I would say, if you are in a position of influence and you're only helping other rich people or other influential people or the daughters of people you know, that's not feminism. And it can't be feminism. I'm not the Santa Claus of feminism. I'm not going around saying, you're naughty and you're nice. It's not my job to say who is or isn't a feminist. But I would say, from the actions of Theresa May, they are not feminists.
Right, are they? Jess, looking at it, I mean, Camilla's obviously defended some of the things that she stood up for.
I mean, I think that I agree. I don't really feel like I'm the person who can pronounce whether people are feminists or not. I think you can only be accountable for your own feminism. But I think with Theresa May, I think that there are arguments where you can say that she has actively made life more difficult for women. Particularly, one of the ones I would highlight is her time in the Home Office, where some of the immigration rules that she introduced, like things like spousal visas, made it far more likely that men who might have been earning money, who might be the foreign partner, wouldn't be able to come and live in the country, and women left on their own with their children. So there are very specific policies.
Right. I think she's a reluctant feminist, is how I would characterise.
Well, you're looking into her mind.
Well, no, it's just based on what she does. So.
All right, let's just talk. One of the other things you mentioned, which caught my eye, is that we're in a period of history since 2015 where men are seeing a reshaping of the world. In other words, I presume that women are beginning to feel the equality that Tom was talking about a little bit more since 2015 particularly. Do you think men are struggling with that?
Yes, and I think I'm not really very surprised, because if all rooms have been for you in the past and then suddenly some rooms seem not to be for you, I can imagine that's very confronting. So there are some rooms that men aren't, posh white straight men aren't allowed into. So, for example, a man might not be allowed into an operating theatre because he hasn't scrubbed up or because he's not a surgeon. But he can pop his head around the corner.
That probably is quite good, yeah.
Yeah, he could pop his head around the corner and see if one of his boys is on the job. And I do think a lot of white men I know do think, look, I put my own shelves up. If I had a YouTube video, I reckon I could do a basic heart bypass if it came to it. I think a lot of men do feel like that. And that's because they see representatives of themselves everywhere they go.
Do you accept that, Tom?
I don't think I'd be able to perform a heart bypass.
No, I mean, or put up shelves maybe.
But I mean, it is patently true that, particularly in the political realm, men have dominated things for the last, well, forever. But it is also true now that the Prime Minister in this country is a woman, the First Minister of Scotland is, the leader of the largest party in Northern Ireland is a woman as well.
We're about to have a Liberal Democrat.
Layla. That's right, yes.
Guys, first fourth. I mean, announce it now. It'd be such a coup for the show.
Yeah, go on, just do it quickly. We've only got a few minutes left. All right, well, I tell you what, to take the embarrassment away from you, or maybe you're not embarrassed, actually. Why should you?
Anyway, moving on.
She's considering
I'm going to show you this front page of the Daily Star, which says, "Give us a Brexit." Just one day, next Friday.
Really
what do we
works.
think? Are we in favour, Deborah?
I want everybody to go on the People's March this Saturday at noon, because whether you voted Leave or Remain, we didn't vote for this.
It's a Brexit day off. It's a Brexit day off, not a government.
Yeah.
Tom,
We can make this end forever if we just
stay in the EU.
we just leave.
Yes,
leave
that's right.
now. Cut ties.
Certainty.
Have it done.
You've all had, standing on your soapbox, do you want a day off Brexit, where nobody says a word about it?
Yes, absolutely.
I think
If you look around, if anyone wandering around the corridors of Westminster can see how much people, MPs, staffers, journalists, just need a break. I think someone was saying that we should have a motion in the House of Commons to give Theresa May a duvet day after a voice vote. I honestly think that might be quite good for everybody.
But
apart from a
we're
duvet,
paid to do, though, right? Like, I mean,
but what about other stuff, Layla? That's the point. Should we be talking about other stuff? Theresa May said people are frustrated.
Yeah, absolutely. And climate change being top of the agenda.
But we can't do that if we go with your long extension, Layla. How can we talk about other stuff? We're still going to be talking about
You
Brexit.
take the heat out of it, and you can do it in a way that's measured. I think, and also all this banding around of words like traitor and betrayal, and we're seeing social media trolling increasing
Rory
right
says
now.
You're tougher than you look.
We are all certainly growing a thicker skin, but we need to take the heat out.
But is it the case that nothing is being done, or is it just the case that the media isn't reporting what's being done?
Well.
We're seeing record investment in the NHS. We're seeing actually the lowest carbon emissions in this country since 1888.
On that.
The fastest fall of any G20 country on carbon
the debate
emissions.
I called in the House of Commons on climate change was the first time in the main chamber it had been debated in 2.5 years.
Because it's
What's
been quietly
happened over the last
What's happened over the last 2.5 years?
It has been
massive falls in
it's
CO2
not
emissions.
Enough.
Massive strides.
And is that as a result of government action?
Yes, absolutely.
Also,
well, not
can I
just
say that
government
the
action, but
Brexit
also moving
coverage,
from
the
coal
Brexit
to
coverage
other
gets
things.
more prominence at the moment. But as Jess and I will vouch, you look in any newspaper, there's still other news, other stuff is happening, and it's still being reported. There's just a focus on it.
Is stuff being done? I mean, if Theresa May herself is saying, I share your frustration, the public, that actually other issues that are important aren't being dealt with.
I think it's very true that other issues aren't being dealt with that probably should be. I mean, where's the social care green paper? There's for example, just one thing that we were talking about at the election in 2017. Things are consistently delayed because of Brexit, and yet we give MPs space in the House of Commons to have general debates on various things because what they need to do is keep time free for emergency Brexit legislation. I do think that is a problem for democracy.
What would you like to talk about, Deborah, if we had a day away from Brexit?
Climate change. I'd like to get all of these children and young people who are taking days off to school the government in what they need to be doing to take it more seriously and not just rest on your laurels and go, oh, it'll be fine. We've done
more
something.
than any other country,
And
any
it's
other
still
G20
not-
country.
I'm going to let them carry on talking about climate
we can
change
do
because
more.
that's all we've got time for. Have a lovely weekend. That's it. Bye-bye.